I still remember the day I walked into Green Rock Logistics for the very first time. I was 26, freshly polished from college, and still clinging to the belief that hard work meant success. The building itself was intimidating. Glass walls, chrome elevators, and that sterile corporate smell of fresh carpet mixed with burnt coffee. When I shook hands with Mr. Harlan, the regional manager, I thought I'd found my big break. He was smooth, perfect suit, perfect smile. The kind of man who made you feel lucky just to be noticed. He leaned back in his leather chair and said, "We're a family here. Stick with me, and I'll take care of you." Family. That word hooked me, because truthfully, I wanted belonging as much as I wanted a paycheck. The first week was a blur of HR forms, endless coffee, and back-to-back meetings, where everyone seemed to be rushing but no one seemed happy. I ignored it. I told myself, this is just how the corporate world works. Everyone's tired, everyone sacrifices. And in those early days, I actually believed the sacrifice would be worth it. Late nights didn't bother me. Staying after hours to finish spreadsheets? Fine. Even when I skipped dinners with friends, I thought, this is what success looks like. But little by little, the shine began to fade. Because for every good job I hoped for, there was silence. For every overtime hour, there was no thank you. And for every promise of growth, there was just more work piled onto my desk. I didn't realize it then, but this wasn't a family. It was a machine. And I was just another cog turning in silence, waiting for the day it would all grind me down. That day would come sooner than I thought. At first, I brushed them off. The little things, the things you tell yourself don't matter. Like the way Mr. Harlan's compliments always came with a smirk, lingering just a second too long on my blouse instead of my report. Or how my paycheck never quite matched the hours I worked, always adjusted, always pending approval. Then there were the meetings. God, the meetings. He'd call us in at 7 a.m., only to keep us waiting while he strolled in at 7:45 with his iced latte and that smug look that said we were lucky just to breathe his air. The real breaking point, though, was how he treated the women. Not directly. Oh, he was smarter than that. But we knew. Every joke that wasn't funny. Every accidental brush of his hand when passing papers. Every time he looked you up and down before deciding whether your ideas were worth considering. And if you dared to complain? Well, let's just say, HR wasn't human resources. HR was his shadow, his guard dog. They didn't protect us. They protected him. That's when I started noticing the others. Co-workers who'd once been bright-eyed and eager like me, now hollowed out, drained, whispering in corners about applications to other companies. And yet, most of them stayed. Because that's what fear does. It chains you down with a paycheck, convinces you survival is enough. But me, I wasn't going to survive like that forever. Not after what came next. Because Mr. Harlan was about to show me just how cruel he could be. And in return, I would show him how dangerous it was to underestimate me. I still remember that morning. The office smelled of burnt coffee and cheap cologne, the same way it always did before the holidays. I walked in thinking today might finally be the day. Maybe I'd get the Christmas bonus I'd been promised for years. Instead, my manager's assistant told me the boss wanted to see me. I carried my notepad, trying to steady my hands, telling myself it was nothing. But the moment I stepped into his office, I knew. He didn't even ask me to sit down. His lips curled into that fake, smug smile I'd seen 100 times before. He leaned back in his leather chair, hands folded like a king about to dismiss a servant. "Let's be honest," he said, his voice slick with arrogance. "Your performance just hasn't been cutting it. We're going in a new direction, so today will be your last day." Just like that. No warning, no thank you, no recognition for the overtime, the weekends, the holidays I'd spent hunched over spreadsheets while my family ate dinner without me. I felt my chest tighten, my ears rang. And as I stood there, humiliated in front of my coworkers watching from their desks, he leaned forward and said words I'll never forget. You should be grateful. At least I'm letting you go quietly. Grateful, after years of breaking my back for his company. I was supposed to be grateful for being tossed out like garbage. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. The fear, the shame, the exhaustion. It all burned away. And in its place was something sharp, something dangerous. I may have lost my job that day, but he lost something much greater. He lost my silence. I walked out of that building like a ghost. No box of my belongings, no goodbyes, just the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the parking lot. It felt like the world had ended. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the eviction notice, already taped to my door. 2 months behind on rent, bills stacked like a wall of judgment on my kitchen counter. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice. You should be grateful. Like a taunt, like a curse. The days that followed blurred together. Job applications, unanswered emails, rejection after rejection. I sold my jewelry, pawned my TV, lived off canned soup and stale bread. My friends stopped calling. My family stopped asking. Nobody wanted to hear about failure. It made them uncomfortable. So I stopped talking. But silence has a way of growing loud. The longer I sat alone, the more the memories haunted me. Every overtime shift. Every weekend ruined. Every time he'd lean too close at my desk, brushing my arm while pretending it was an accident. Every joke that wasn't a joke. Every raise he promised but never gave. I realized something. It wasn't just that he fired me. It was that he'd taken everything. My time, my dignity, my health. And now, when I had nothing left to lose, I found something I never thought I'd feel. Clarity. If he thought I would fade away quietly, he was wrong. If he thought he could bury me under his lies, he underestimated the woman he'd created. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to wait. I was going to fight back. And this time, I'd make sure the world was watching when he fell. Revenge doesn't start with fire. It starts with paper, with silence, with patience. The night I decided to fight back, I pulled out a box I hadn't touched in years. Old pay stubs, emails I'd printed, contracts, even a notebook I used to jot down the little things he said and did. Back then, I thought I was being paranoid. Now, I realized I had been building a weapon. I spent hours combing through everything. The unpaid overtime, the bonuses promised in writing but never delivered, the harassment jokes disguised as office banter. And the more I dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a bad boss. This was a pattern, a system. And I wasn't his only victim. So I started making calls, quietly. An old coworker here, another there. People who had left broken, humiliated, just like me. At first, they didn't want to talk. But when I told them what I had, emails, signatures, proof, they opened up. And the stories they told, they made my blood boil. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about all of us. I created a folder on my computer labeled with one word, justice. Inside, I stored everything. Every receipt, every timeline, every testimony. But information alone wasn't enough. I needed a plan. So I split it into 3 parts. 1. Hit him where it hurts, the company's secrets. 2. Expose his rot, so his reputation never recovers. 3. Take back what was stolen, every hour, every dollar, every shred of dignity. The more I mapped it out, the calmer I felt. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't scared. I wasn't desperate. I was dangerous. And I knew this much. The man who thought he could crush me had no idea what storm I was about to unleash. The first rule of revenge? Never go straight for the kill. You start with a cut. Small, sharp, just enough to make them bleed, and wonder where it came from. I knew my boss's ego better than anyone. He thrived on control, on making sure every eye in the office was watching him. Every whisper was about his so-called brilliance. So I took that spotlight and turned it against him. It started with an email. Just one. Not from me, never from me. Anonymous. Inside were copies of harmless things he thought he'd gotten away with. A message mocking a female employee's accent. A late-night directive to falsify overtime records. His private calendar entry where he blocked off a business dinner with his mistress. I didn't send it to the world. Not yet. I sent it to HR. And I CC'd just enough mid-level managers to make sure it couldn't disappear quietly. Within hours, whispers started. By lunchtime, the office was buzzing. And by the time he called an urgent staff meeting, his face was pale, his hands shaking behind that fake smile. He told everyone it was a smear campaign, a jealous ex-employee trying to ruin his career. But I could see it in his eyes. For the first time, he was scared. And that was only the beginning, because the real storm hadn't even hit yet. When I saw him sledding under his own lies, I knew I had him right where I wanted. But whispers and rumors weren't enough. Not for what he had done to me, and to everyone else. So I became what every corrupt boss fears most, a whistleblower. For months, I had been quietly collecting everything. Pay stubs that proved unpaid overtime, screenshots of women filing harassment complaints, only to have them accidentally deleted. Invoices padded with fake expenses that went straight into his personal account. I had names. I had dates. I had proof. And I knew exactly where to send it. First, to the Department of Labor. Then, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And finally, to a journalist who had been chasing corporate scandals for years. I didn't just send a few files. I sent a storm. Hundreds of pages, organized, cross-referenced, undeniable. But here's the part that made it perfect. I didn't attach my name. No fingerprints, no trail. The story broke like lightning in the night sky, sudden, blinding, impossible to ignore. Headlines screamed, major tech firm accused of wage theft and harassment. And inside the office, chaos erupted. Phones rang non-stop. Lawyers stormed the building. The same managers who once smirked at his jokes now avoided his gaze like it was poison. And my boss, the man who had laughed when he fired me, he was drowning. Every camera, every spotlight, every whisper, now aimed straight at him. For the first time, he wasn't the predator. He was the prey. And I was just getting started. The moment the news broke, I watched the empire he had built start to crumble. But that wasn't enough. I wanted total control. Not just to see him sweat, but to reclaim what I deserved. Weeks before, I had quietly begun preparing. While everyone thought I was gone, I had been collecting copies of key contracts, memorizing the company's supplier and client list, studying their digital footprint, passwords, and internal systems. I had one advantage he never anticipated: intimate knowledge of the company's heartbeat. And now, the perfect opportunity arrived. The board called an emergency meeting to discuss the scandal. Shareholders were panicking. Lawyers were arguing. I walked in, unexpected, uninvited, but with documents in hand that made them stop mid-sentence. I believe the board deserves to know who's been keeping the company afloat while leadership failed, I said. And I laid it all out. Contracts he had ignored. Deals I had saved without recognition. Clients who were about to walk away because of his negligence. Eyes widened. Mouths dropped. Board members exchanged looks that said it all. This ex-employee just became the only person capable of saving the company. Negotiations began instantly. Terms were drafted. And within a week, I had consulting rights, veto power over executive decisions, and access to company funds to ensure proper operations continued. The man who had fired me, belittled me, ignored my hard work, now answered to me. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply walked the halls I once cleaned and fixed, now with authority, reminding everyone silently, never underestimate the person you throw aside. For the first time in years, I was not just surviving. I was in control. The story didn't end in the boardroom. Oh no, it was time for the world to see the truth. I knew that my former boss had a reputation to protect, a carefully polished image that hid years of mismanagement, harassment, and unpaid wages. But the truth has a way of finding light, and I became its flashlight. I started with whistleblowing. Every email, every document, every proof of negligence and wage theft was meticulously compiled. I reached out to regulators, journalists, and industry watchdogs. The company's wrongdoings and my boss's reckless behavior were exposed to the public. Headlines appeared. Top executive accused of wage theft and harassment. Whistleblower reveals shocking corporate misconduct. Employee fights back against toxic leadership. The fallout was instantaneous. Investors panicked, stock prices plummeted, and clients demanded accountability. Former colleagues, some who had once laughed at me, now whispered in awe and fear about the woman who dared to fight. Meanwhile, my former boss tried to spin the narrative to paint me as a disgruntled employee. But the evidence was overwhelming. The board suspended him, lawyers filed suits, and his public image was shredded. I watched it all unfold from my office, sipping my coffee, with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had played the long game. The man who thought he could humiliate me had underestimated the intelligence, patience, and resilience of the person he dismissed. And the employees, those who had once suffered under his tyranny, now looked at me differently. They came to me for advice, for reassurance, for leadership. For the first time, I realized my revenge wasn't about vengeance alone. It was about justice, fairness, and setting the record straight. The reckoning wasn't loud or violent. It was strategic, meticulous, and utterly satisfying. And it proved one undeniable truth. You cannot silence the determined. After the public scandal hit, the tension in the office became unbearable for everyone, especially for the man who had tried to destroy me. I knew the final confrontation was inevitable. I walked into the building one last time, my heart steady, my mind razor sharp. The air was thick with whispers. Colleagues watched, some in awe, some in fear. I could hear him muttering under his breath as he realized the woman he had underestimated had returned. He tried to assert authority. "You think you've won?" he spat, voice shaking. "This changes nothing." I smiled calmly. "It changes everything," I said, sliding a thick folder across the desk. Inside were all the documents proving every misstep, every harassment complaint, every unpaid wage. The board had already reviewed them, and this final handover ensured the law was watching. There was no yelling, no dramatics, just the quiet power of preparation meeting justice. He glanced at the papers, then at me, and I saw the realization hit. He was finished. I took one last look around the office, places I had spent long, exhausting hours, where my efforts were dismissed, where my dignity had been challenged. I had conquered them all. I walked out of the building, heels clicking on the marble floor, each step a statement. I was no longer bound by fear, manipulation, or a toxic environment. But my revenge wasn't just leaving. It was claiming everything I had earned. I collected the company laptop, my personal notes, and the designs I had developed. Every piece of intellectual property I had created became part of my legacy, a reminder that no one can take away your skill, creativity, or integrity. Outside, the city lights shone like a celebration. Freedom never felt so sweet. For months, I had planned this, meticulously, strategically. And now, with my head held high, I stepped into a future that was entirely mine. As I hailed a cab, I glanced back one last time. The building loomed, a monument to the past I had conquered. But my eyes were forward, on the road ahead, knowing I had turned pain into power, humiliation into triumph, and betrayal into victory. And in that moment, I whispered to myself, they underestimated me, but I never underestimated myself. And that is how real power is born.